Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. Firstly, I want to address that I was too lazy to give this webinar today. I was thinking if I could put an AI in my place and then that could drive this webinar as such. But looking at all the possibilities that are happening in the industry, we're not very far wherein an AI will be in my place, talking to you guys, giving the expressions and stuff. So let's hope this is not the last time the real Akhil is giving a webinar. But yeah, here we are today. We are going to talk about some insider secrets to evaluate RBVM platforms. Like Aliba was talking about, there are a lot of platforms out there that claim to do a lot of fancy stuff. But when you deep dive into them, then you realize, these platforms are not meeting my requirements. Some of them require a lot of changes, integrations, and much more. So I have been in this space, or we as a company have been in this space for almost 5 years now. We have worked, with a lot of enterprises. We looked at a lot of competitors, and we clearly know like what aspects do you have to look into when you are buying a RBVM platform as such. So let's start with a quick agenda. The agenda might sound really boring as such, but I'll try to make it really interactive. I'll try to share as much knowledge as possible during each of these, um, titles and stuff. So we will kick off by talking about how vulnerability management has evolved over a period of time. How did it start? Where do we stand? What's the future of it? Likewise, we are going to talk about what is RBVM and how is it to go beyond traditional vulnerability scanning as such. Then I'm going to share some secrets into key evaluation criteria. So what is the checklist that you have to follow to buy an RBVM platform? We also released an ebook, which I'm going to share at the last of the presentation, wherein you can download the ebook, which is about 30-50 pages long, wherein you have a clear picture about in terms of what you have to look for. Then once you implement an RBVM platform, what are the real world implementations or considerations that you have to do? That is one more important aspect that you have to look into. And we will end with some Q&As. If you have any questions for the webinar, please feel free to ask us. If you don't, my LinkedIn is open, my Twitter is open. You can drop some questions as DMs over there as well. So, okay, before I jump into the actual stuff, let me introduce myself and our company as well. So Strobes, the company I work for, is one of the first CTEM platform. It's a continuous threat exposure management platform. We do provide attack surface management and vulnerability management at scale. And I myself, I'm a co-founder, chief technology officer at Strobes. I've been in this industry for almost 10 years now. I started off with, offensive security, then moved into engineering. I kind of primarily handle the engineering aspect at Strobes, wherein I do AI, scaling, DevOps, and much more things. But like I said, I come from a hacking background, so I published a lot of research on the internet. So you can go to my HackerOne page, look at all the disclosed bugs. You can follow me on Medium, wherein I talk about engineering challenges. I talk about some automation things. Like for example, one of the automation things I've did in the past is automating our inside sales within our organization. I wrote about it. And then at the early stage of my career, I used to report a lot of bugs to Fortune 500 companies and startups. So, it feels good to be acknowledged by all these companies as well. So let's start the actual thing, the real topic that we are here for. So let's start by addressing the elephant in this industry. Like, there is a common misconception, and when I started off, I thought this misconception is only with very few people, but later I understand everyone believes, or most of them believe the same, right? So vulnerability scanning, when we look at it, and vulnerability management, when we look at it, as two different things, they are not the same, right? So when you're doing vulnerability scanning, do not claim or do not believe that you are fulfilling the entire vulnerability management as such, right? So think of it like, a vulnerability scanner within your organization is more like a tool. But whereas if you look at vulnerability management as a whole, it's a strategy, it's a process, it's a framework, or it's a culture kind of a thing, right? So everyone out there might be doing vulnerability scanning, but as far as I know, it's just step one within within the entire vulnerability management thing. The real vulnerability management actually starts when you start discovering the vulnerabilities as such, right? For example, how do you know what vulnerabilities do you have to fix? How do you keep a track on remediations and patches, and many more aspects of it, which comes under this entire vulnerability management framework as such. So if we understood that vulnerability scanning is not equal to vulnerability management, then we are good. Let's move into the next slide, wherein we are going to talk about the evolution of VM. So we all know that in the early 20s or even in the 90s, uh, everything started off with manual vulnerability scanning and assessments, wherein there are applications, networks, which are manually assessed for vulnerabilities and threats. Uh, while doing that, you only get to see a point in time kind of results. Like I did a vulnerability scanning today, and then I know for a fact that, okay, this has been the coverage, or I might not even have the transparency on coverage, but I'll get a point in time of view wherein I know that, okay, there are 8 criticals, 10 high, 3 medium, whatnot. Then later into 2010s, the technology has improved. The skill sets in terms of people has also drastically improved. Then we started off, doing continuous vulnerability scanning, wherein you can schedule the vulnerability scanners, which are more frequent. You can integrate with different tools, and the coverage has a bit improved, right? Then in 2020s, we started off introducing risk-based vulnerability management, which is a very cool thing to do. A lot of the companies started to adopt to it. So risk-based vulnerability management is nothing but moving away from standard severity-based patching or standard CVSS-based patching towards risk-based prioritization patching, wherein you can integrate with different sets of data, like for example, asset data, vulnerability data, and then you also get to look at threat intelligence data and much more. And when you correlate all these three aspects, you have a better picture in terms of what vulnerabilities you have to fix first, right? So the entire industry is starting to adopt to this. But then what I also see, this is my personal belief, uh, most likely others will also agree to it, wherein in a couple of years, a lot of these platforms will start adopting large language models, AI, and stuff. So to be in line with it, we have already started off rolling out autonomous agents, which are like your on-demand workforce, which will do most of your job and stuff, right? So autonomous agents will be a great addition to these entire RBVM platforms. So these autonomous agents will be good at accessing tools, will be able to interact with external integrations like, let's say, cloud providers, vulnerability scanning tools, bug tracking tools, and whatnot. And if let's assume that large language models get better in terms of chain of thought and reasoning, then we will see a lot of different jobs like triaging, vulnerability management, getting automated using these autonomous agents as well, right? So this is what I see in terms of where we were in the past, where we are today, and what we are heading towards. If you are in line with this, then I think you are doing vulnerability management, you know, very accurately as such. So moving on. So the other key thing that the other thing that I get asked a lot is, why is there a need for a platform beyond vulnerability scanning tools, right? So I am running an SS scan, I'm running a vulnerability scan for, let's say, web applications, mobile applications, or whatnot. why do you think there is a need for an extra vulnerability management tool as such, right? So let's try to answer that. So if you look at the stat, this is one of the boring stats I keep on heading back to, the number of CVEs that are increasing every year. But like we know, we are developing custom applications. There are custom environments. We are on cloud. A lot of misconfigurations, threats, and whatnot. If we take everything under considerations, we are constantly being vulnerable to a lot of vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and threats. All right. So there is a significant increase in terms of vulnerabilities that we are exposed to. And because of that, if you are using just a vulnerability scanning tool, here are all the challenges that you have to face. So one of the biggest challenge even today, and I've also mentioned this on our previous webinar, wherein people still use a lot of Excel sheets as such, right? So because of the Excel sheets, you have to do a lot of manual work like collecting data from different vulnerability scanning tools, drop it on an Excel sheet, and then probably assigning it to a few people and staying behind them for patching and whatnot. Likewise, when you're dropping all this data in a dump, you often lack contextual information like what asset is it mapped to and what attributes does it asset have? Like, is the asset critical to your organization? Does it fall under PCI scope? Does it, require some compliance? It's one of the key factors driving your organization's revenue and many more things. So you do not have that contextual information within your Excel sheets and stuff. Likewise, a lot of manual patching and remediation process, which are very slow and inefficient. For example, like I said earlier, you might have to keep on following up with the respective folks to understand whether a vulnerability is patched or not. Then you have to raise a ticket within Jira, and then you have to track the vulnerability status within Jira. And if it is closed there, you come back to an Excel sheet and close it back here as well. Likewise, a lot of this Excel sheets or a lot of this manual approach does not have historical information. So at any point of time, if I ask you, are you doing better in terms of overall risk exposure, overall risk scoring and whatnot, you wouldn't have an answer as such. So you don't have the information on how many vulnerabilities have been patched in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and whatnot. So to overcome everything, like to overcome all these things, over and above, let's say Nessus, Zap, Burbseed, or whatever vulnerability scanning tool that you're using, you need a vulnerability management or a risk-based vulnerability management platform that can do all these things, which is one, vulnerability aggregation as such, plug in with all these vulnerability scanning tools and bring in data into one single place. The second thing that we're looking at is risk-based prioritization. So understanding the asset context and automatically prioritizing the vulnerabilities to often tell you which vulnerabilities you need to patch first as such. Likewise, you need a lot of automation workflows, wherein you write certain rules to automate your day-to-day repetitive tasks. One example as such is when you're running Nessus, you might get or end up getting a lot of vulnerabilities related to SL, TLS, and whatnot. And within large organizations, they often tend to close those vulnerabilities as accepted risk, right? So if you're getting those kind of vulnerabilities, let's say you have the ability to write an automated workflow, let's say title contains XYZ, you automatically want to change the state to an accepted risk. So those kind of automated workflows is what you need to look for. Next up is the remediation tracking. So we all know that IT folks, developers, they tend to use Jira, ServiceNow. So having an integration with those kind of platforms and sending data out and keeping the data in sync is pretty much required. So whatever vulnerabilities you have, let's say with you, is sent back to Jira, and the statuses can be bidirectionally synced. Likewise, you have a comprehensive reporting, because this vulnerability management platforms have historical data, they can at any point of time tell you if you are increasing in terms of risk scoring or asset exposure and whatnot. By the way, Strobes, our CTEM platform, does all of these things. Feel free to look out our other videos and you will get a better picture on how you can automate all these stuff as well. So So like I was saying, these are all the key components of a comprehensive VM, wherein you can integrate with CMDBs and cloud providers and get continuous asset discovery as such. So you can integrate with all all these tools and get a comprehensive view of all your assets. The next aspect that you have to look into is prioritization and risk scoring. So you know what vulnerabilities to prioritize. Likewise, the asset risk scoring the asset risk scoring is customizable and so forth. Then you have remediation workflows. Like I said earlier, you can integrate with Jira, ServiceNow, or any tracking tools as such, and write workflows in terms of what vulnerabilities have to head towards which you know application engineering team or IT team and whatnot. Verification, able to understand if a vulnerability is closed and able to reflect the same status within the RBVM platform. Reporting and metrics, so you have the ability to customize your dashboarding, metrics, widgets, and whatnot. Then one of the key aspects is integrations with threat intelligence as well. So if you can integrate with any threat intelligence tool and you're able to bring in exploit information, zero-day information, attack groups or threat actors or whatever it is, that will be really important in terms of prioritizing your vulnerabilities as well. So far, I've talked about why do you need an RBVM platform. Now let's try to answer whether if you're already using, let's say, a vulnerability scanning tool, do you still need another vulnerability or RBVM platform as such? So this is one of the common questions I get asked a lot within the industry. So whenever I give demos or I'm interacting with any CISO or security manager as such, they often ask me that, hey, I'm already using Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable. What value does an RBVM platform provide? Well, so I'm going to answer that. So if you're already using Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7, there are many scenarios.
Akhil, so sorry to interrupt you. So we have a question, like we have some live questions here. So one of the questions asked by Karthik is that does RBVM has capability of scanning and patching as well?
So it depends platform to platform, wherein let's say, so basically RBVM platforms sit above your general vulnerability scanning tools, right? So they do not have the ability to run vulnerability scannings out of the box. And likewise for patching, they would be able to orchestrate, or you will be able to write workflows to remediate the vulnerabilities as well. But not all of them, because these RBVM platforms are good in ingesting all sorts of vulnerabilities, let it be cloud vulnerabilities, host vulnerabilities, application vulnerabilities, and whatnot. It wouldn't be able to cover all aspects. Maybe host level vulnerabilities, some of the platforms can cover and whatnot. But this is going to quickly change because, like I said earlier, we're going to move towards autonomous agents, and autonomous agents can be really, really good at writing code as well as changing some configurations in cloud as well. So that uh, remediation workflows or automated remediation is soon going to be implemented in all the RBVM platforms, is what I believe. Yeah.
I hope this your question is answered, Karthik. Akhil, yeah, we can move on.
Anyway, let's take all the questions at the last as well. Okay.
Okay, sure, absolutely.
So continuing with the webinar, so I was talking about, let's say any organization is using Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7. Do they really require another RBVM platform as such? So let's try to answer that, because all these companies out there do also claim that they are doing RBVM as such, right? So if you look at all these different tools and where do they fall, this is where they are. So I've marked Tenable, Nessus, Astra, Rapid7, whatnot as vulnerability scanning tools. Then we have vulnerability assessment tools. Then we have vulnerability management tools. And then there are risk-based vulnerability management tools as such, right? So the key differentiator over here is vulnerability scanning tools are good at doing one job. Let's say they're doing host scanning, they are doing web application scanning and whatnot. And all the results are within that platform. And over and above, if you want to do some kind of orchestration and fancy stuff, again, you have to bring in a data lake, or let's say, Elasticsearch or whatnot, to pull in the vulnerabilities from the vulnerability scanning tool, and then do your all other sorts of stuff, which most of the industry is already doing it. But whereas a risk-based vulnerability management platform is really good at integrating with vulnerability scanning tools, vulnerability assessment tools, penetration testing tools, attack surface management tools, and you would be able to write all these automation rules within the RBVM framework as such. And RBVM framework is really good at prioritizing because it'll have all the asset context, vulnerability context, threat intelligence context, and it'll be able to correlate vulnerability information from multiple tools. So you have better transparency and a better approach to remediate vulnerabilities as such. So I have multiple scenarios over here, like any CISO or a security manager can ask themselves before even going towards a risk-based vulnerability management platform. So in a scenario one, there is an enterprise which is using a single scanner, let's say Tenable, Qualys, or whatnot, but they have a very large environment, right? They have thousands and 10,000s of assets, hosts, endpoints, and whatnot, and they get massive set of vulnerabilities, like 100,000 vulnerabilities historically, and they are having a very tough time managing those things. And also, they have many teams that are working in silos. If you have to patch a single vulnerability, a type of vulnerability, you have to move towards X team. And if you're patching a application vulnerability, you have to go towards an application engineering team and whatnot. And they have a lot of microservices. Again, the teams can be split within the application development team and whatnot. And likewise, you need a way to have historical data, and you have a requirement for complex remediation workflows and automation. Then, of course, yes, you need an additional platform, which is like Strobes or Defect Dojo or whatnot, that can help you out in automating a lot of these things as well. The advantages for such an organization would be you would be able to normalize data. So every organization has a way to look at the data, like the titles have to be a certain way, the descriptions have to be a certain way, the mitigations have to be in a certain way and whatnot. So you would, by integrating with these kind of platforms, you would get a way to normalize the data, unlike just sticking with what the vulnerability scanning tool provides. You would get an option for advanced analytics. Like I said earlier, the industry sometimes in the lack of challenges, because they are facing a lot of challenges, they might end up using Power BI tools or data lakes to provide some advanced analytics. So in that purpose, you need an RBVM platform to make it easier for you. And then every organization might have a different risk scoring approach or mechanism or an algorithm or whatever it is. So for that purpose, you can use an RBVM platform wherein you can customize your risk scoring as well. Likewise, if you need a lot of integrations wherein your vulnerability scanning can be an incoming tool wherein you are getting the data from into the RBVM platform, but then you also have many output sources like SIM tools or a bug tracking tool or whatnot, then you will look for an RBVM platform that has a lot of integrations as well. Likewise, the other scenario that you can look at is, okay, now I'm using multiple vulnerability scanning tools. Let's say I'm using Tenable, Qualys, or any other vulnerability scanning tool for host. But at the same time, I'm using, let's say, SNCC for software composition analysis, software bills of material. Then I'm using AppScan for dynamic application security scanning, check marks for SAST and whatnot. Then 100% yes, you need an additional platform wherein you can have a centralized dashboard to view all types of vulnerabilities at one single place as such, right? And this will have its own advantages. And trust me, this is going to make your life as simple as easier as possible. The advantages are you can deduplicate vulnerabilities coming from multiple sources. You will have a way to aggregate vulnerabilities into one single source. You will have a unified reporting. So you will not have to go to each of these platforms and get a report, download it, send it back to your key stakeholders, and have a fight with them. You will have a unified reporting wherein all the data sits at one single place. And like I said earlier, you will have the ability to do cross-platform prioritization. So you're getting a DAS vulnerability, you're getting a SaaS vulnerability. You can look at the two of the vulnerabilities and can take smarter decisions in terms of what's the priority of these vulnerabilities and so forth. So you have cross-platform prioritization opportunity while using an RBVM platform as such. So now that we have talked about why do you need an RBVM platform, when do you have to go for an RBVM platform, assuming that you have taken that decision. Okay, now all these years I've used a vulnerability scanning tool. It's time to be matured. I'm going towards buying an RBVM platform. By the way, if you have taken the decision, please reach out to Stropes first before you reach out to any competitors as well, because we have all the features and can fulfill your requirements. But then let's assume that you have taken the decision. The next thing that you're evaluating all these platforms. So what do you have to look for? So I have it written down for you guys. So if you're looking at buying any RBVM platform, so these are the 7 different categories that you have to look for. One is data ingestion and normalization. The second aspect is asset management and discovery. Third thing is risk scoring and prioritization. Fourth is workflows for remediation, ticketing, and much more. And then 5 is reporting and analytics. 6 is scalability and performance. And then 7 is the integration ecosystem as well. The other aspects is obviously support, pricing, and things like that, which I'm going to talk about as well. But if you look at the technology itself, what are the key things that you have to look for is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to deep dive into each of these specific items. At end of this Q&A or at the end of this webinar, I'll also give you access to an ebook which you can download, and you will get a better picture in terms of what are the 100 more things that I have to look for while buying an RBVM platform as such, right? So let's talk about data ingestion and normalization, right? So you taken the decision of buying an RBVM platform. You have written down what are the vulnerability scanning tools that you're using within your organization. Uh, so you go back and ask the vendor whether what scanners do they support, like what vulnerability scanning tools they can ingest vulnerabilities from. That is one thing. The second thing that you want to look for is custom data sources. Like, let's say you do not have vulnerability scanning integration. How do integrate with, let's say, an X tool or Y tool? Do you have a framework wherein I can write some Python scripts or JavaScript to ingest vulnerabilities from? Third aspect that you have to look for is normalization. Like I said earlier, all these data sources are producing different types of vulnerability information. When it comes back to a platform, you don't want to see it in a JSON representation or a representation that is not easily readable by a normal user. So you would want to ask them, how do you normalize the data? And it is very different for different type of data vulnerability sources. Let's say you are ingesting a SAST vulnerability. The data normalization should show you file names, line numbers, vulnerable code, mitigation, and whatnot. If you're looking at a DAS vulnerability, you would want to look at what are the affected endpoints, the steps to reproduce, mitigation, descriptions, and whatnot. If you're looking at cloud vulnerabilities like CSPM vulnerabilities, you would want to see the account ID, region, cloud resource ID, and whatnot. So the normalization within these platforms should be very standardized, and you have maximum transparency in terms of what data is available on the platform when you integrate your vulnerability scanning tool to it. The next thing that you have to look for is asset management and discovery. So the RBVM platforms are really good at maintaining a centralized asset inventory tool. All the enterprises have been using CMDBs, which is great. But at the same time, if you have an asset management within a vulnerability management tool, you would be able to extract information such as coverage. How many vulnerabilities have been scanned by Nessus? How many vulnerabilities have been scanned through, let's say, an application security scanner and whatnot? So having a robust asset management, I've emphasized on this a lot in my previous webinar as well. You can check that out, but that is very important. So is there an option to continuously discover assets within these RBVM platforms? It can be through integrations, through CMDB tools or through cloud providers and whatnot. If they have out of the box integrations with cloud providers like GCP, Azure, AWS, and you're able to bring in assets on a regular basis, or if you're able to sync all the cloud resources on a regular basis, that is a great addition to the RBVM platform as such. The second thing that you want to do is asset contextualization. So you might be maintaining a lot of different columns, attributes, information within your CMDB, or as information as tags within a cloud provider, right? So you have to be able to ingest that information as well, which will be able to understand, you know, which asset belongs to which teams, and it is in sync with your CMDB and such. You should be able to do tagging. You should be able to add custom attributes, just like your Excel sheet. The reason a lot of the folks end up using Excel sheets is because they're able to add a lot of different columns. And if you're able to do the same thing within an RBVM platform, it's nothing like it. So look for a platform that has the ability to add custom fields or more columns to your data table or data grid. That is great. The next thing that you want to look for is assigning these assets, identifying what business units are there within your organization, which asset owner is available, all these aspects. If you're able to assign these things, that is a great addition for you. Likewise, you're able to figure out the last seen of the asset. Let's say, when was it last seen on a cloud provider? When was it last seen on a vulnerability scan? And those kind of information, if it is exposed to the platform, that is great. So one of the use cases, I was providing to an enterprise was, so they're doing Nessus scans. They're doing, they're heavy on cloud, so they scale up and down as and when required. So one of the key problems or challenges was, how do you know the specific IP address is within a Nessus scan or not, right? So what RBVM platforms can do is they can sync data from your AWS provider, and then at the same time, because it can correlate information, let's say with a vulnerability scanning tool, you would be able to figure out, okay, this particular asset has been seen or last seen within an NSS scan 30 days back. So that means it hasn't been scanned for 30 days, and then you can take decisions with respect to your compliance, taxonomy, and whatnot. The next thing that you want to evaluate in all these RBVM platforms is, do they have the option to do risk scoring and prioritization? Risk scoring for assets, prioritization for vulnerabilities. So everyone, when they use any vulnerability scanning tools or any vulnerability management tools, all they can see is the score is 90, 100, whatnot, right? As soon as you look at the score, you do not have the motivation to even go further, right? So one of the key aspects is that if the RBVM platforms can be tweaked according to your organization's policies, GRC requirements, and whatnot, so that would be a great addition to these RBVM platforms. So you're able to tweak your asset risk scoring. You know that which assets are critical to your organizations. You know that what are crown jewels. Likewise, from a vulnerability standpoint, you know that which vulnerability weighs more for you based on this asset context and threat intel context. If you can customize those kind of things within an RBVM platform, that is a great addition to you. Likewise, like I said earlier, all these RBVM platforms should have historical information. They should be able to integrate with threat intelligence. And in terms of threat intelligence, they shouldn't have a limitation, is what I believe. They should be able to integrate with their own threat intelligence if they have any, or they should be able to integrate with any external feeds if you provide, let's say you have recorded future or any threat intelligence tool that you want to integrate with. It should be flexible in terms of that. And all of the things have to be as much automated as possible, so that it will reduce your operations time by multifold as well. Likewise, these platforms should be really good with remediation workflows, like I was talking, or like I was answering one of the questions someone asked. So if the platform can do automated patching, well and good. But like I said, automated patching in terms of coverage for all types of vulnerabilities, host, code, application, cloud, it's kind of difficult. But let's say they provide all those things. That's well and good. But what you really want to do, or what the enterprises have in place, is that they would at least want the platform to create an automated ticket on a Jira or a ServiceNow or where not, because all these enterprises will have good amount of policies. They wouldn't want someone to automatically patch a vulnerability that might break something on prod or dev environment or whatnot. So if these platforms have a way to automatically create tickets on bug tracking tools or ITSM tools with ability to bidirectionally sync severities, comments, and states, that is a great addition to any RBVM platform as such. Likewise, the ability to set up SLAs in terms of how long a vulnerability can be open, and these SLAs can be tweaked based on severities, business units, whatever fields that you have within a vulnerability management environment. If the SLAs can be tweaked, that's a great addition as well. And like I said earlier, if the RBVM platforms do not do, out of the box patching, if they can integrate with another third party patch management tool like BMC or SSEM or those kind of tools, that's a great addition as well. Uh, so likewise, the next thing that we can talk about is reporting and analytics. Uh, I was talking about this earlier, how you can have a unified view of your entire assets and vulnerabilities, risk scoring and prioritization. And if you get a historical view of all this data and you're able to convert that into charts and dashboards, that is really amazing. So when you're buying any RBVM platform, just look at whether they have the opportunity to create custom dashboards, custom reporting, custom widgets or charts, and if yes, what kind of charts do they provide, right? So there are a lot of charts, right? Pie charts, um, line charts, stack bars, spark lines, time series graphs, and whatnot. So it's very important. All these platforms do support these kind of reporting as well, because when I looked at platforms, I've seen that some of the platforms only provide KPI level, charting or ability to create charts. But if someone is able to do as good as a Power BI tool, then you wouldn't end up looking at any third party tool as such. So you can do everything within a one single platform itself. Likewise, these platforms should have as much as possible compliance mapping and taxonomy mapping as well. If not, if they can give you the opportunity to customize, so that you would be able to create compliance reporting or taxonomy reporting as in when required, that's a great addition as well for these RBVM platforms as such. The other key aspect, like this is, oh my god, this is one of the most important things. Like the reasons we have built this platform is because we have been using Defect Dojo in the past, and I know how much scaling is really important to any organization as well. So all these RBVM platforms we looked at or our customers have experienced are really bad in terms of how many assets or vulnerabilities they can ingest back onto the platform. So when you're looking at these vulnerabilities, RBVM platforms, they might appear really fancy. The user experience can be great. The UI can be great. Uh, all these things are really good. But if you can't ingest, let's say 100,000 vulnerabilities in 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatnot, then those platforms are going to suck, because uh, you won't want to break the platform with all the vulnerability information that you have. So always try to evaluate these platforms by dumping a CSV file. Let's assume like all these RBVM platforms will have an integration for CSV imports. Just dump about 1 million vulnerabilities in these CSV files and see how long does it take to actually capture that vulnerabilities and present you in terms of reporting and stuff. So the ingestion has to be really fast, and it should scale in terms of how many assets or vulnerabilities it can ingest and show you on the dashboard as such. Likewise, if these platforms do have multi-tenancy, that's well and good. Your data will be very well segregated as such. Likewise, if these platforms are on cloud, that's a great thing. But according to your GRC or compliance requirements, if they have an additional on-premise offering, and even for the on-premise offering, make sure it's easily scalable. At the same time, it's easy to deploy. Check if it's containerized. You will be provided with Docker Compose files or those kind of things. If it is that, then on-premise is a great addition as well. Likewise, the integration ecosystem, this is fairly important. When we look at all these platforms, they have hundreds of integrations listed on their website. But when you actually start using those integrations, some of them might lack features like tagging. Not all the tags are being imported from these third-party tools and whatnot. So look for how many out-of-the-box integrations are these platforms are providing. What data are they ingesting back onto your platform? Is it fulfilling your requirement in terms of, let's say I'm using a third-party tool, let's say Snyk or Qualys. I have heavily invested in tagging my assets and vulnerabilities over there. If I'm ingesting those data as well back onto the platform, well and good. But if you're not, then you might have to put extra effort for that as well. So check out, if all these out of the box integrations pull in as much data as possible. The second thing that you want to look at is API flexibility. A lot of these integration or a lot of these RBVM platforms or vulnerability scanning tools do not open up their APIs. But when you are looking at an RBVM platform, make sure all the APIs are provided to you, or at least the APIs for ingesting assets or vulnerabilities are exposed to you with scalable approach, like they have pagination, cursor-based pagination, and those kind of things, because I've looked at many platforms that do not offer that, and it's really pathetic. You might end up being in a very chaotic situation as such. So they should have an API flexibility, and it should be very technically advanced in terms of, let's say, GraphQLs or REST APIs or whatnot. They have to provide those kind of things. If they have a GitHub organization and they're maintaining their scripts and everything with respect to these APIs or their integration ecosystem, that's well and great. Look for cookbooks or some examples that they have written. And if it's in place, that's well and good. Likewise, one of the things that we do at Stroves, and I think that is really helpful, is scripting framework. We give the ability to customers to write some Python scripts or JavaScript to automate vulnerability ingestion and asset ingestion. So let's say there is no out-of-the-box integration. At any point of time, it's not a roadblocker for you. So you can start using the script framework and ingest any vulnerability or asset from any source as such. So that is one key aspect that you have to look for. Let's say at any point of time, once you have subscribed to an RBVM platform, in between you bought an additional vulnerability scanning tool and you want to integrate it with your RBVM platform, it shouldn't be a roadblocker. Instead, just check out if they have like some scripting framework for time being to make that happen as well. So now we have talked about all the uh, good things about the implementation. How do you evaluate an RBVM platform as such? The next thing that you have to take care of, obviously, when you're implementing these RBVM platforms within your organization. There is a lot of culture resistance, of course. There is going to be it's going to involve a lot of teams. So you have to be careful in terms of both technology as well as people as well. So start with a pilot program. The way we are doing with enterprise organizations is they don't right away integrate with all the vulnerability scanning tools. They start off with smaller vulnerability scanning tools, let's say a SaaS tool or a DaaS tool. Then they would start to do that pilot program with a application engineering team, and then they would move to an IT team and so forth. So start with a pilot program and then scale slowly as well. Also, one of the things that I want to add is whenever you're buying an RBVM platform, don't do a trial of 14-day or a 15-day, whatever it is. Do a trial that is at least 30 days, might go to two months or so. Again, this is not efficient for any vendor as such, but RBVM platforms requires a lot of collaboration within an organization. It has a cultural effect as well. So do a POC for good amount of time and then take a decision as well. Not all vendors are flexible. Check it out who can do a 30-day POC and then properly invest in that. Likewise, you have to invest in proper configuration and customization. Whatever input sources that you have, They have to be integrated. So there is a one-time setup or installation that you need to take care of. You need to train your team as well. Like for example, if someone has to go back onto the platform, change the statuses of the vulnerability, or have to take some decisions in terms of what can an SLA be, or adding some comments or whatnot. So there is a uh, learning curve there as well. So you have to train your team thoroughly as well. Likewise, set up proper targets, KPIs and stuff, so that at end of the pilot program or the POC or whatever it is, you know that what is the success criteria that you have to look for. And if it is communicated for both within your organization as well as for the vendor, that would be really awesome as well. Next thing that you have to look for when buying any RBVM platform is what's the pricing like? Like how complicated is it or how simple is it? If you ask me, one of the most simplest pricing would be based on number of assets that you're ingesting. If that is the only thing that uh, you know the vendor is charging you for, that's great. So if the pricing is as simple like X dollars per asset and it decreases based on the slabs or the number of assets that you have, that's a great way to deal with pricing as well. Likewise, if you have additional transparency in terms of support or implementation costs and so forth, that would be a great addition to that as well when you're buying an RBVM platform as such. Likewise, some common pitfalls to avoid. When you're looking at asset criticality and risk scoring, do not overlook it or do not give it up. So one of the things that any CISO or a stakeholder will look for is how customizable is the risk scoring. So make sure it's available on the platform. Do not neglect the ability to customize the platform. Like I said earlier, the dashboard should be very flexible in terms of reporting. The automation should be very flexible in terms of to meet any requirement that you have. Likewise, the integration should be very flexible in terms of if there is no out of the box integration, you should be able to add any uh, you know code or whatever it is so that you can kick off from there itself. Also when you buy an RBVM platform, this is very common, not just for an RBVM platform, for any platform out there, not fully using up to its potential. So when you are buying an RBVM platform and when you're laying down your success criteria, make sure you meet and are fulfilling all the things that you have written down as such. Okay, so we have come to the end of the webinar as such. So I'll talk about what's the future like for RBVM. So one of the things that I am researching, I'm fully into at the moment is large language models and AI. So there is going to be a very big shift in terms of how vulnerability management should be done and will be done, though the base underlying thing process and everything is going to be the same, like whatever we discussed so far, but who is going to do that is going to change. So I know that lot of the organizations are facing challenges in terms of skill, cybersecurity workforce and whatnot, but it's going to change in the coming days. So within Strobes, we have introduced something called Strobes agents, which leverage large language models, which are really good at chain of thought, reasoning, and things. So you can automate a lot of tasks, but let it be closing a vulnerability or triaging a vulnerability from uh, taking decisions like prioritization, risk scoring, and whatnot, can entirely automated by using AIs. Likewise, a lot of these things will be moved towards DevSecOps shift left. So all the vulnerabilities are captured within DevSecOps DevOps pipelines, and then you would be able to take decisions whether to pass the pipeline or fail the pipeline and those kind of things. So RBVM platforms will be very friendly with your DevSecOps practice and stuff. There are already platforms out there, like application security posture management platforms, which are really good at it. But all these platforms will be in line with it in the coming days as well. Improved threat intelligence utilization, enhanced automation and orchestration capabilities is what you will get to see in the future as well. So the key takeaways from this entire webinar, I'm sure you guys might have many questions. Please feel free to drop it in the Q&A box or reach out to me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. But the key takeaways for this entire presentation is that vulnerability management is something that goes beyond vulnerability scanning as such. So today, when you go back, if you're doing only vulnerability scanning as such, take a decision, start buying, or I would not buying, but start setting up a practice or a culture within your organization wherein you're doing vulnerability management end to end. RBVM platforms do offer a very critical advantage for complex environments, for your organizations to make it easier in terms of patching vulnerabilities as such. And consider, whenever you're doing vulnerability management, consider the entire vulnerability lifecycle as a part of your assessment as well, right? So, like I said earlier, we have just launched our vulnerability management buyer's guide, which is available on the website. Everyone who has joined the webinar will get an email about it as well. You can download it. It's a 30 to 50 page long, and it's an entire checklist in terms of how you can buy a vulnerability management platform as such. So feel free to do that.